Hi, everybody. My name's Adam Schneider, and you're listening once again to the Farm and Country Podcast. Today is episode 9, and it is Wednesday, and we are, in fact, looking at an article that I saved from. You know what? I don't even know when I tore this out of a magazine. I just have the page here, and it's been sitting in my files ever since. But the title of the article was what caught my eye. It had a picture of money on it, which is obviously an eye-catching thing, and it says full-time or part-time farming. So I thought, what an excellent topic to talk about when we have a podcast where one of our focuses is how to make money on a farm or on a small acreage. So this article was written by Lorne McClinton, and it comes out of a magazine called Agrisuccess. So it is a mainstream farming. There's nothing in there that's like organic, or this is not focused on small family farms or anything. It's mainstream farms, and it's a Canadian point of view. So, but you know what, this point of view could be applied to most or most of, if not all of North America, because, you know, farming in Canada and farming in the US is pretty much the same. There's the same percentage of people involved in farming, and the types of farms you'll find are pretty much the same. Canada and the US are cousins in this regard. So anything that I tell you today is probably going to be at least partially true for the US. I don't know about Mexico, but you guys have another world down there. So if I can find a link to this article, I will post it in the show notes. However, I don't think I'm going to find a link because I don't think there is a link. This is just an article I just tore out. So I'll start by talking about full-time or part-time farming. The article starts by saying there's an old saying that you can never have too much money. However, it is certainly possible to have too little money. The Statistics Canada low income cutoff rate, um, it's the most common method for estimating poverty in Canada. It tells us that the national after-tax poverty line in Canada for a family of 4 is $22,206. So, yeah, that's not very much. If you're single, the poverty line is $11,745. So this is old. This is probably going to be about 6 or 7 years old. So I'm guessing that they've put the poverty line up. Tomorrow's rant, by the way, is going to be all about the poverty line and how it's basically just a not ideal way to tell people whether they're wealthy or not. But today, let's assume that this poverty line is a real thing. So $22,000 divided by 2,000 hours, that's $11 an hour. So at the time that this article was written, $11 an hour was a little bit higher than the minimum wage. Right now, the minimum wage is more than $11 an hour. Um, and I can tell you, if you're making $22,000 a year, you're probably not paying a nickel in income tax. You will be paying the pension plan tax, and you'll be paying employment insurance tax, but you're not going to pay any income tax because you're going to fall well underneath the minimum income for a family of 4. You'll probably get a bunch of money back in the child tax credit too. But anyway, $22,000 a month, or sorry, a year. Boy, that'd be nice if you got that a month. But that's not very much. And for a family of 4, that's not, especially for Canada and the prices we pay for fuel and stuff like that. You're not making much money at all. But many farms, okay, so it goes on to talk about the average income for a farm. So, off-farm income, guys, so if you're in farming and you have a job outside of the farm. I fall into that category. So for me, this is very relevant because I'm trying to farm. I'm doing my best, but the income I get from farming is nowhere near enough to be what I would consider a full-time income. And even, well, I guess if I doubled or tripled it, it would start getting close. And this year we can start doubling or tripling. But the truth is that most farms don't make enough money to have somebody full time, or at least to be the only income that that farm or the people living there receive. So, in the 2006 Census of Agriculture, this article says that just about half of the 327,000 farms reported having off farm income. And, well, okay, that's not surprising considering that that same census showed that 44% of farms don't make enough sales to cover their operating expenses. Now, that surprised me. Um, Basically, what that's saying is that 44% of farms have more expenses than they have income. So there's two reasons for this. Number one, a lot of the people who report farming income are not trying very hard to make any income. And a lot of people are really good at, raising, there are a lot of people out there who know how to raise chickens. They know how to brood chickens, they know how to make, chickens grow really well, but they don't know how to make good money off of chickens. So they end up crunching their numbers, or maybe they don't at the end of the year. And that's the surprising thing too, is that many people who are involved in a farming enterprise, they don't they don't sit down and say, what kind of expenses do I need to actually count here? They might know what they're paying for feed and for heat, but there's probably a half dozen other expenses that they haven't put into that budget. Now, of course, there's the other reason that farms are reporting not enough gross sales to cover their expenses, and that's because we live on the farm, we're allowed to write off a certain amount of expenses that would be considered living expenses if we didn't have the business. Okay, so right now I'm sitting at my desk and I'm recording a podcast, and this is a business. I am fully intending to monetize this podcast. You're going to start hearing ads on this show. If that bothers you, I'm sorry, but I need to, this is going to be my income. But the space that I'm using is inside my house. And so I can write a certain amount of that off against my business income, which means that if I really structure things well, that my write-offs could exceed the income I get from all of my farming activities. And for the last probably 5 years, I have definitely written off more expenses than I have in income received. And I definitely can't keep that up forever. I mean, eventually the Canada Revenue Agency is going to come to me and say, hey, we don't think that you have any expectation of profit, so we're disallowing some of these old expenses, and you got to pay back a bunch of income tax that you got. So this year, I actually expect to turn a profit, and I actually expect to turn a pretty good profit. So one of the reasons that I'm planning to turn a profit is because um, I'm following some of the instructions in this article here. Now, it carries on to say, while many farms are financial success stories, producers often choose to farm for cultural, not economic reasons. Now, that is very true. A lot of the people who live in the country are doing so because there's a culture out here, not because we thought we could be rich. When I moved out here, I had no intention of trying to earn any money or income whatsoever. I mean, I knew that that was always a possibility, but it was never the primary or driving force behind my decision. And it still isn't. Making money is just something that I've learned how to do over the last few years. It's not the thing that drives my life. I'm out here on the farm because I like it out here. It's part of my culture. My family lives on farms, well, except for my parents, but my grandparents did. And so I spent a lot of time growing up on the farm, and that sort of stuck with me. So even if I wasn't making money, I would still be out here and I would still be trying these things. Except I wouldn't be looking so much to make income as I would to be just sort of experimenting with just sort of off-grid living, stuff like that. So for those of us who are not financially independent yet, we need to have an off-farm job. Even if that off-farm job is something that you do in your own house, it's still basically income that's not coming from farming. Now, I'm a huge, huge fan of multiple income streams. And we're going to definitely be talking about multiple income streams. Guys, if you don't have multiple income streams, you are at risk. Your whole family is at risk. Not of the end of the world, not the zombie apocalypse, but what if something happens to your job? What if maybe you don't lose your job, but you have to go on some kind of long-term disability? What if your spouse who may have a part-time job, what if they can't work? What if you have another baby? What if, right? What if? I mean, you have a fire. There is just 1,000 different what ifs. So disasters might not happen to the world, but it might happen to you. And having multiple income streams, especially income streams that are passive, even if they're not earning a lot of money, are very, very, very important. So whether that's some kind of investment program that you're putting money into and it has some kind of interest rate, or whether you're creating some kind of income stream through content, you're selling artwork and you get commissions from that, or whether it's some kind of online store, which is something that I'm putting together right now. Having that second income stream is kind of important. And this falls into the category of a second job. So, you know what? It's not a big deal to have a second income because it's true that farming isn't always about making money. Sometimes it's about the independence of farming and the independence of raising your own food and the health benefits of having, food that you produced sitting on your dinner table. But you know what, guys? I gotta tell you, no matter what your goals are in farming or living off the grid, it's important for you to have a written plan to help you define and meet your goals. Okay, so that's actually a quote from the article, except he says it's either way, it's important to have a written business plan. But I took out the word business because it doesn't have to be a business plan. Because maybe you're not trying to start a profitable business. Maybe you're just trying to live off the grid, whether you're trying to save money from living in the city or whether you're trying to do this for lifestyle reasons. You need to write down your goals. Because if you don't write your goals down, they become this amorphous vapor. A person without written goals is somebody who will just let things happen and they'll have no idea why anything happens the way it does. But a guy who's written down what he wants to do, or a woman, because in my honest experience, I find that there are probably more women who want this lifestyle than men. So if you're a woman and you're like, man, I really want this off-grid farming lifestyle, hey, you need to follow this advice too. Write down your vision. And what I would say is think 10 years from now and say, where do I want to be? So for me, I was not, I didn't get on this right away. I didn't really write down my goals except right in the very beginning. I knew what I wanted to do. I was writing things down, but I didn't adjust my goals as I went along, and I I just failed at every turn to make those things happen. Part of the problem was that we kind of got started off on the wrong foot with the type of housing we chose and the amount of debt that we were in. But right now, I do have a written, I guess you could call it a life plan with where I want to be in 10 years. And there's a lot of things on that plan. And realistically, not all of those things are going to happen. I want to write books. I have a renovation plan that we're doing this year where I want to build a basement. That's kind of priority one. And I have a bunch of farming goals that I'd like to see happen. But you know, writing down these goals is vitally important. Now, the next thing that you do when you write your goals down is that you work out how you plan to reach them. So let's create just a random goal here, and we'll say, hey, I've got a goal. I want to get my driver's license. Now, I actually um, spoke with somebody who needs to get his he wants to get his driver's license. He's a friend of mine. He lives in the small town that's the nearest small town to me, and him and his wife, neither one of them have driver's licenses, but they don't really need it because they can pretty much walk everywhere they want to go, and they don't really have the kind of money that owning a car would require. But he does, he had the goal of getting his driver's license. And so I said, okay, well, that's a great goal. But you're not just going to walk out the door tomorrow and go sit down in the driver's seat and take the test, right? What is step one? And he said, well, I guess I could go out and practice with somebody. And I'm like, okay, well, who? And he's like, oh, I don't really know yet. And I'm like, all right. So you know what your step one is. Now you just need to work out how you're going to accomplish step one of your overall vision. Guys, if you don't have a step one of your overall vision, you need to sit down right this second. And first of all, you should have your vision written down. If your vision isn't written down, it really doesn't exist. Just because it's in your mind, just because you think about it all the time, doesn't mean that that vision has any substance. If it's not written down, it doesn't really have the same kind of impact. Writing that thing down is vital. Even if you're just writing on a piece of paper and you're like, okay, well, there it is. And it's just this line at the top of the paper. Because writing that down inspires writing down the next step. And the next step for you is, what am I going to do to make this happen? What is the first thing that I need to do? So here's another example. I want to build a basement underneath my house. Now, that's not something that's going to be easy because there's a whole bunch of steps involved in that. But for me, step one is to contact an engineer and get them to draft, or get him or her to draft up a set of stamped plans so that I can go and apply for the building permit. So I've already done that. I have an engineer on tap. I already know what kind of information he needs. So now, not only do I have step one accomplished, I know what steps 2, 3, 4, and 5 are. And usually, doing step one will reveal what steps 2 through 400 are going to be. I mean, it might take you 400 steps to get to your goal. And maybe by the time you get to your goal, you're like, oh, what I actually accomplished was a little bit different than what I actually set out to do. And you know what? Goals kind of change over time. And maybe the original goal that you thought you had, turns out not to be as important as you thought it was going to be. And that's okay, because you did something. You didn't just sit around frozen with indecision about where to start. You went out and you did step one. And maybe step one leads to something else. But usually it doesn't, especially when you're doing something like, building a basement. Hopefully at the end of this, I'm not going to find out that I built, some kind of flower garden or something like that. Oh, I thought I was building a basement. Turned out to be, a water, a pond or something like that. Well, I mean, if the water table's high enough, it might end up being a pond. Um, but in any case, that is how you accomplish your vision. Step one, start with that. So, if you want to make a living from farm income only, how do you make that happen? Or is that really something that you need to do? Can you have income from multiple sources? So these are things that I've had to sit down and consider. And when I wrote out a business plan last year for farming, I sat down and I had to write out the expected revenue from everything I thought I was going to be doing. And I actually came up with a business plan that was probably going to work. And I say probably because you know what they say, that no battle plan ever survives contact with the enemy? Well, no business plan ever survives contact with the marketplace, but you have to have somewhere to start. So you sit down and you say, okay, how many sheep am I going to buy? Okay, well, I need 100 ewes. And 100 ewes will produce 170 lambs. And so this is what I expect to receive from selling my 170 lambs. This is what I expect to pay to feed them or to give them shots. This is what I expect to pay for transportation. This is what I need to do for fencing. It becomes easy. When you think through it like this, it actually becomes really easy to see the end from the beginning. And I sat down and I came up with a plan that I figured would earn me about $80,000 Canadian every year. And I knew it was going to take me a couple of years to reach that goal. And at this point in time, I'm not 100% sure I'm going to pursue that all the way to $80,000 in revenue, but I could. I just don't think that I have enough land to support that many animals. And I don't want to have a business plan that involves spending $60,000 so that I can earn $100,000, because to me that's a waste of time, and spending that kind of money just kind of seems pointless to me. I would rather make $45,000 and spend 10,000 than to spend 60,000 and make 80,000, because in the end I actually walk away with more money. Instead of walking away with $30,000 or $40,000, I can walk away with $45,000 or $50,000 while producing less, because the expenses are the major part of any farming operation. And I don't want my expenses to gobble up all of the revenue that I make. So we're going to talk about that on another podcast episode. Reducing inputs on your farming enterprise. But if you want to make a living from our farm income only, how do you make it happen? Do you need to reach a certain scale? Do you need 200 ewes? Or is adding what they call value-added processing a better option? So for me, there are a couple of options for selling lambs. I could take those lambs and I could take them to the sale barn or to the auction, and I could throw them in a pen and be like, all right, God, help me get a good price for these lambs, please, please. And then, if somebody comes in and bids a good price for the lambs, I make maybe $180 a lamb. Maybe I don't make that much. Maybe I make $200 a lamb. But I have no control over the price I get for those lambs. And the sale barn or the auction was going to take 7% of that sale price as their commission fee. So that's one option. But guys, that's not the option that I'm choosing. See, I'm choosing an option where I take my sheep to a butcher and I have them processed, and then I sell highly valuable lamb meat to the consumer who eats it. And last year I did that, and I made good money. I didn't make, much more than $10,000, but I only had a few animals. In addition to the grazing, I made pretty good money. And that's because I did this value added processing. So consider this. This is what value added processing could do. Imagine that you've got a field of wheat. Now, a normal farmer will have 10,000 acres of wheat. Yes, out here in the prairies, it is not unusual for farmers to have an operation that covers 10,000 acres. They don't own all of that. A lot of it will be leased. Some of it might be land that they own as a partnership with someone else who also farms it. Because honestly, 10,000 acres, you're just not going to be able to do that on your own. But the farmer, he might get, I don't know how much wheat you're going to get off that. I could probably sit down and calculate it, but you're going to get a ton of whatever commodity you're producing. Like 10,000 acres of anything is a lot. So you're going to need gigantic silos to hold all of that. But these guys, they take that commodity and they sell it for whatever price they're going to get on the wholesale market. Then, after that, somebody comes and buys that wheat. Now, that wheat might change hands 2 or 3 times before it gets to the guy who puts it in bags and sells it to the end consumer. So when I go down and I want to buy feed wheat from the United Farmers of Alberta store, it costs me probably double or triple what the farmer is getting for that wheat. Now let me ask you, why couldn't the farmer take some of his wheat and bag it and sell it as feed? Now, of course, a lot of farmers will say, well, you know what, that's too difficult. It takes too much time to do that. I'm spending all this time managing the 10,000 acres. Okay, that's true. That's true. You don't have to do that with 10,000 acres worth of wheat. What if you just did that with maybe 160 acres of wheat? What if you had a customer that you said, okay, I will sell you feed wheat, but I want a little bit more money than the market's going to give me. But I'll deliver the wheat directly to your farm, and I'll give you the best wheat, and I'll even clean it for you. See, this is what happens when you add value and processing to your product. You get more money from it. If you're just selling your animals on the open market, you're going to get the minimum price that you could possibly get. You're not going to make any more money than the bare minimum. That's wholesale. But if you go out and you process your product and turn it into something more valuable, you get more money for it. You see how that works? So let's say that you have a mill in your barn, and you've got a gigantic mill, and you're like, okay, I got thousands of pounds of wheat here. Thousands of pounds, by the way, would be an underestimate of how much wheat you'd get off 10,000 acres. You'd be looking at millions of pounds of wheat. But let's say, okay, you take 160 acres worth of wheat and you mill it into flour. So you take that flour and you sell it in bags. And I don't know what flour goes for, but the last time I bought a bag of organic stone ground whole wheat flour, I think it cost me somewhere in the neighborhood of $35. And that's probably low. I bet you'd pay $40 for that much flour. So, I mean, whoever sold that wheat basically doubled his money because turning it into flour doubled the value of it. So here you can see that scaling up is not necessarily the best way to make more money. Sometimes a small scale operation with tons of value added processing in the stream can make good, maybe not great, 100 grand a year kind of money, but good money, like support yourself kind of money. So if you're out there and you're raising bees or something like that, or you've got berries, or you got some kind of product that you could sell on a wholesale market, you've got to start considering other options to add value to those products. And this is how you can earn a living from a tiny piece of land, guys. This is how you do it. You simply take your product and you continue processing it until it's so valuable that a very small chunk of it is worth a lot of money. So you take your raspberries, you cook them down, and you make them into pies. And then you sell the pie for $9 a pie. And yeah, $9 a pie. I've paid $9 for a good pie. We've got out here, we got Hutterites. These guys are masters at this value added processing. I bought, actually, no, I think it was my wife who bought this pie. She bought the pie from the Hutterites, but I would have bought it. She bought it for $9. It was a pretty decently sized pie, but $9 for a pie is a lot of money. But it was a freaking awesome pie, and it was worth $9 to me. And you know what? If I ever see that Hutterite van driving around again, I'm going to ask him if they've got any more pies, because it was an awesome pie. And I'm happy to pay for the value in that pie. Somebody spent time putting together the pie, slicing the apples, and adding value to what was probably like 50 cents worth of apples. Honestly, there's not a whole lot of apples in any given pie, so if you've got an apple tree or something like that, that's the way to turn those apples into more money. And now this can be done with anything. This can be done with anything. So if you've got wood, if you've got land that you can grow trees on, instead of planting pine trees, which are worthless, although they do grow fast, you can plant some kind of long-lasting, but maybe takes a long time to grow kind of tree that might pay you a lot of money when it's cut down and processed. So some kind of hardwood, like oak or what's it, teak? Yeah, teak apparently is a very valuable tree, although it takes a long time to grow. And there are people out there with a couple of acres of something that are looking to make $100,000 just off one product from that piece of land. And it's because of value adding processing or delaying the gratification of their income. So let's say that you want to plant Christmas trees or something like that. That's another way to do it. But we'll get into that in another episode. So today, you got to make a decision if you want to be a full-time or part-time farmer. If you're on the acreage and you're like, I don't know what I want to do with this property, start with making a 1-year plan. Say to yourself, where do I want to be next year at this time? Do I want to have a garden? Do I want to have some raspberries? Do I want to have a strawberry little patch here? Do I want to have some trees growing? Okay, well, right now, it's the month of May, and if you want to have trees growing, they have to be in the ground basically right now for them to be growing and budding. Well, okay, here in Canada, trees grow and bud in around June. Maybe in other places around the country they grow and bud out earlier than that. You lucky guys. But you got to start thinking, what do I need to do right now to make that goal happen? So that's it, guys. That was episode 9, full-time or part-time farming. Once again, you can find us on the web at www.farmandcountrypodcast.com. Yeah, you can find us on iTunes. I just submitted the iTunes feed, so it is live on iTunes. Thanks for listening, and have a good night.